Love that Remains, An Inquiry, Movement 3, Carrying the Realization, by Liz Eaglesnake. June 15th, 2026. Looking into his eyes, I felt a warmth I had not experienced before. Not ecstasy, not transcendence, not revelation. Something quieter. The way in which a knot softens when tension is no longer being applied. My heart seemed to expand, breaching the physical distance between us. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he smiled. What do you think happened? I sat with the question. Because while nothing had changed, something had happened, and something felt different. I think we're closer, I replied. Me too. He paused. Like whatever was removed had been quietly sitting between us. In the previous movement, Relationship as Revelation, the inquiry shifted away from the content of my thoughts and toward the mechanisms that organize them. What interested me was no longer the specific story I was telling myself. It was the process by which experience became organized into a story in the first place. I began noticing how perception, interpretation, identity, memory, expectation, and protection could quietly shape reality before reality had fully arrived. And as that became visible, something else became apparent. Understanding the mechanism did not necessarily free me from it. I could recognize a pattern and still find myself living inside it. I could understand interference and still interfere. I could see what was happening and still lose access to that knowing under stress. This left me with a different question. Why? For weeks, I had been focused on the thread, protection, the realization, the interference. But now, I could finally pay attention to what happened after it was gone. Not the realization itself, the consequence, the increased intimacy. For many years, I had been making a mistake. I had thought realization, insight, or understanding was the goal. But when I was faced with the impossible truth that death handed me, understanding did not necessarily change my life. My realizations were genuine, many insights true, my awakenings had been authentic. Yet somehow my ability to live from those realizations collapsed after the most catastrophic event of my life, and my inquiry began through the missing question. Not how do we realize something, but how does realization remain available long enough to become inhabitable, even under pressure? And what eventually emerged was not an answer, but an architecture. Knowledge understands. Knowledge can study, explain, or describe a teaching. Realization recognizes. What was previously understood through knowledge becomes directly recognizable through experience. Somatic contact touches. For a moment, the truth becomes directly accessible through sensation. The realization becomes available inside the organism. Stabilization sustains. The realization stays available for the organism through ordinary life, long enough for reorganization to begin. Reorganization adapts. Neural patterns, perceptions, habits, and reactions begin rearranging themselves around the realization. Capacity emerges. The organism becomes increasingly capable of remaining with the realization under changing conditions. And as capacity increases, continuity becomes possible. Not because truth became stronger, because the organism became capable of carrying it. In simpler words, the realization was genuine. My organism could not yet carry it. This explains why insight does not automatically become capacity. A person may genuinely realize they are loved and still lose access to that knowing when friction arises. The realization is not the problem. The capacity is. And perhaps love follows the same developmental arc. Being loved is not the same as receiving love. Receiving love is not the same as carrying love. Carrying love is not the same as remaining available to love as conditions change. This is where I began noticing something surprising. Many of the moments that increased intimacy were not moments of agreement. They were moments of contact, where reality remained available despite discomfort, despite misunderstanding, despite fear, despite uncertainty. Capacity may not be the ability to avoid disruption. Capacity may be the ability to remain in relationship with reality as disruption occurs. Most people already understand this intuitively in relation to the body. A single workout does not make a person stronger. Strength emerges through adaptation. A stimulus is applied, the organism responds, recovery occurs, capacity increases. The weight of a dumbbell itself is not what produces growth. Adaptation does. The nervous system appears to operate in a remarkably similar way. Conflict does not automatically increase capacity. Neither does grief, intimacy, or realization. A stimulus is received, the organism adapts, capacity increases. This is why two people can encounter the same teaching, the same ceremony, the same relationship, or the same laws, and emerge with profoundly different outcomes. The stimulus may be identical, but the adaptation is not. Then perhaps capacity is not a trait. Perhaps capacity is an adaptive response. The organism learning, over time, how to remain in relationship with increasingly intense experiences. Likewise, the first time a disagreement disrupts the field, it can take days to find our way back to center. Not because the love disappeared, not because the realization disappeared, not because the contact disappeared, but because the organism could not yet carry them under load. Another time, the return happens more quickly. The third time, faster still. Eventually, something surprising becomes noticeable. The disagreements themselves may not be changing very much. The nervous system is. The activation still appeared, the misunderstanding still appeared, the discomfort still appeared, but the return became easier, faster, more available. The realization remained available for longer. Capacity is not the absence of activation. Capacity is not learning how to eliminate every stimulus. Capacity is learning that not every stimulus requires that we organize around it. Capacity is the ability to return to center again and again, until returning becomes more natural than leaving. A realization can arrive overnight. A thread can be severed in a moment. A truth can become visible instantly, but capacity unfolds differently. The first return is difficult, the second less so, the third begins to feel familiar. Eventually, what once required enormous effort becomes natural. Not because reality became easier, not because the realization changed, but because the organism adapted. A quiet invitation. If something in this essay feels familiar, if it feels like a bridge you are already standing on, I invite you into deeper contact with the work. I am now opening a small group space. The work is still revealing its deeper architecture. The space itself will be simple. A held field, silence, presence, sound, conversation when needed, periods of non-interference. An opportunity to remain in contact with yourself without immediately rushing toward explanation, resolution, or reconstruction. This is not therapy, not performance, not optimization, and not a promise of transformation. It is simply an invitation into proximity with the field itself. The space where nothing false needs to be maintained and nothing true needs to emerge before its time. If the work is already speaking to something in you, you are welcome to reach out. With continuity, Liz Eaglesnake.